Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show on 3 and Rivals. I'm your host, Kenny Van Doren, always joined by Kyle McAreavy. I think I got a little Irish twang to that one. But Kyle, we're going to get right into it. Mizzou football hosting Mississippi State in Week 12 for its home finale. Before we get into a preview for that game and our picks, I want to ask you just a couple questions about some Texas A&M cleanup. Drinkwitz, of course, speaks to media at noon every Tuesday. Also goes on his radio show on Tuesday and then does the SEC teleconference on Wednesday. Any quick hitters just from those three that stood out to you? Anything Texas A&M wise? I know he's kind of in the media and the headlines right now too for another take on just the outlook of college football each year with the boom or bust and or college football playoff or bust. Any just quick hitters from that before we talk about the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary thing is Drinkwitz took responsibility in all facets, which he does after pretty much every loss. He's not a guy who's going to pass the buck after a loss. He comes out and says, like, yeah, I didn't do a good enough job coaching. He emphasized, like, he okayed going with max return on what ended up being the fake punt instead of a safe coverage to protect. That wasn't his call initially, but he took responsibility because he's the one who has to okay it before it gets called. There's a lot of stuff like that where there's room to say, somebody else did something wrong there, but he's very much consistently been a guy who says, like, no, the buck stops with me and it's my fault that we didn't do a good enough job. In general, I think the Tigers just got outplayed, outcoached. I mean, Texas A&M's arguably the best team in the country at this point, top three, and it'll come down to the playoff probably to determine between them, Ohio State and Indiana. They've gone in and beat a lot of really good teams, and they made a true freshman making his first start at quarterback look like a true freshman making his first start at quarterback. And that was kind of, I think, the key difference early on.
Mizzou fell 6-3. All three of those losses coming in the past 4 games, 2 bye weeks smashed into that as well. 2-3 in SEC play, losing by 3 scores, 38-17. You go into week 12 now. This is your final home game of the season. Could be a little makeshift rock game for the Tigers if they win this. Haven't lost a senior game in a long time. And, best of my knowledge, even when I was at Missouri, or just enrolled there, I don't remember them ever losing a senior game. Of course, you get the rock if you win it. I actually have mine over here. I'll grab it too. Show you. Here's mine that I got my senior year. Took it from the rock. Got it because I was on the beat for the football team. But if you're watching with us on the YouTube, that's where you get to see it. Sorry for those podcast listeners, but go subscribe to Mizzou Today on YouTube as well. Tigers coming into this one, 7-point favorites last time I checked, and I'll go check that again once I throw it over to you, Kyle. 6:45 kick on SEC Network. What are some of the keys to this game? I know there's some injuries on both sides of the field. Mississippi State monitoring Blake Shapen this week, the quarterback, see where he's going to be. And then Brett Norfleet was out last week. Was there any update on him in the press conference this week from Drinkwitz?
No direct update on Norfleet. I expect he'll be questionable when the first injury report comes out tonight, and it's just kind of a continuation of that day-to-day thing that Drinkwitz mentioned after Vanderbilt when he had a separated shoulder. So, expect his name to be on the availability report tonight and probably throughout the week. And it'll just be a determination of, by Friday, if they think it's healed enough to have him try to go. And as you mentioned, Blake Shapen's the other big one for Mississippi State starting quarterback. If he doesn't go, they'll start true freshman Kamario Taylor. So we could have a battle of true freshman quarterbacks making, I think it'll be Taylor's first start. He's played pretty regularly. They've used kind of a 2 quarterback system the past couple of weeks, not full time, switching off all the time, but Taylor's come in the red zone repeatedly as a big rushing threat. And I think has like 6 rushing touchdowns this year. So his name pops up a lot when I'm doing around the SEC each week, just running through the scoring plays. If he has to start and Shapen's just fully out, that's a pretty different role than what they've used him in recently, but it won't be his first in-game snaps, or pressure snaps or anything like that.
Looking at the numbers, he's attempted 19 passes this year, completed 11 of them, 174 yards to the air, 3 touchdowns. And a number that just jumped out to me too when I was looking at this, and I wish I could, find an easy way to toggle this and see where this kind of stacks up. Blake Shapen has been sacked 31 times this year for 238 negative yardage. Going through just the rushing as well. With Taylor, 34 carries for 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. So 8 total touchdowns to his name this year. It was a name that popped up on the board too. This was way before, we started doing this, Kyle, or at least I started doing recruiting. But some Missouri fans kind of remember him being linked to the Tigers at one point. I did pull up the line as well from BetMGM, the betting sponsor for On3. Still a 7-point spread in favor of Missouri, over under set at 51.5. So looking at that with that number in mind, with like the experts and what the computers think that this number will be, I'm going to pull up your prediction for this game, Kyle. And do you want to guess where you kind of ballparked this number before the start of the season? You're muted.
Thank you. Before the start of the season, I probably was thinking of Mississippi State in pretty similar terms to how they played last season, even though there's been a lot of roster turnover. And I was more confident in Mizzou's offense at that point. So I bet I said Mizzou 31, Mississippi State 14.
Very close. You had 34-21 in favor of Missouri. I'll read your explanation too. Oh boy, Mississippi State was bad last year, and I don't see much reason for a big improvement. Team is 5-5 right now. I think this is the easiest SEC game on the schedule, and lining it up as senior night should give some extra motivation. I think this one is an easy Tiger win. Looking at mine as well, I had it at 38-21. It said still rebuilding while under second year coach Jeff Levy. Mississippi State lost top wide receiver Kevin Coleman Jr. to Missouri this offseason. Bulldogs didn't show enough improvements to fend off back-to-back losses to the Tigers, and I predicted 38-21. I think I'm going to stick around that number, Kyle, but also maybe in favor of Mississippi State. I don't know if that's just from a lot of like the doomsday Missouri fans that I'm still friends with from college that have been talking to me about this game and where they think it goes. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a tighter matchup than that one. Than I had 38-21. We just still haven't seen it yet, just with this Mizzou offense all clicking together, and maybe you're expecting some more, freshman contributors or redshirt freshmen, and Jude James at tight end, who got his first start this past weekend in lieu of Norfleet, and so Olubide starting as well over Marquise Johnson, and I know he's had a great freshman year, great first year in the SEC. I'm going to ballpark this. I'm going to say 24-21. I think it might be a tight contest, and they've had some pretty fun tight contests before on SEC or on senior night, even going back to 2020 against Arkansas when that game ended in overtime. So I think that's where I'm kind of looking at this one. Actually, I don't think that game ended in overtime. I think it ended just like right at the final horn.
Man, it is rough going back and actually reading the description from those preseason predictions. Mississippi State is a lot better than they were last year. I think they showed that pretty early on in the season when they beat Arizona State, and that's not a bad Arizona State team. They've been really close in a lot of SEC games. I think they went overtime against Texas. They were within a score against Texas A&M. Overtime against Oklahoma, maybe. I know they had another overtime game. They've been kind of right there. And when I spoke with Paul Jones of Maroon and White Daily, that was kind of the thing he pointed out is they have definitely taken a step forward. The roster is better and deeper than it was last year. They just haven't quite been able to finish games. And when I made my score prediction this week, it was 21-17 Mizzou. Mississippi State's run defense has been the worst part of the team, I think by a pretty good margin. And Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts both went over 100 rushing yards against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, much better rush defense than Mississippi State. I think this could be a big game for just getting the ball out of Matt Zollers' hand by handing it off and letting those two kind of do the damage. Defensively, Mississippi State's offense is pretty good. They've got 2 receivers in the top 10 of total yardage in the SEC. They've got 2 running backs who have both been pretty good. Fluff Bothwell has gotten a couple of shout outs this week. He had been hurt for a couple of weeks. Sounds like he's back and kind of getting back into form after playing last week. So there is reason to think this Mississippi State offense can move. I think Mizzou's defense, even after, the actual numbers coming out of the Texas A&M performance are not great. There's 450-ish yards and 38 points. That looks bad if you're just looking at a box score. But I would say that's about as impressed as I've ever been by a defensive performance that allowed 30-plus points. Like, they played fantastic until they got their back broken by other units. Like the fumble at the end of the first half, the fake punt, those are in no way on the defense. And if you take off 14 points, or maybe the fake punt ended in a field goal, I can't remember. But if you take off 10 to 14 points, that game looks a lot better. And if you put in an amount of offensive production that, not even a good day on the offensive side, but an adequate one, then the defense is off the field a lot more, able to recover more, and has some heart left in it at the end of the game in a way that it pretty clearly didn't, especially once the fans all exited the stadium midway through the fourth quarter or slightly earlier. I think this defensive unit is still fantastic and should, how do I want to phrase this? Not should handle Mississippi State's offense pretty well, but has a good shot to shut down what has been a pretty good offense more than it has been shut down these past few games.
Received a lot of comments, especially on Facebook, of want to see more of Ahmad Hardy, especially when you have a freshman quarterback, and everything you talked about with that run defense, Mississippi State. Perfect opportunity to get that tandem going again, and probably even a little bit more for Hardy. Both rushers had over 100 yards in that game against Texas A&M. So you're kind of expecting the same with Jamal Roberts in that one. And of course with Hardy too, he's from Mississippi. Maybe this is a big game for him facing Mississippi State. It doesn't seem like a guy who holds grudges, just from the stories that we've seen, from what you've written, just hearing him talk in press conferences as well. It doesn't seem like a guy that might hold a grudge against a school that didn't give him a chance, but he is a Mississippi kid. So maybe this one is a big one for him, playing for some of his upperclassmen teammates on senior night. This game is on Saturday at 6:45 p.m. The final home game, Mississippi State at 5-5. So looking for a bowl game, a ticket to a bowl game in this one, because they're going to have a bye week. And then they'll have the Egg Bowl against Ole Miss. And that's a tough task to try to get your 6th win there. Okay. Are you ready to pivot over to basketball?
Let's do it.
All right. One more just quick thing on football as well. I guess commit watch wise, you haven't seen it. Rocco Marriott could, join the Missouri class at some point. In-state kid from Platte County, quarterback, state champion. His dad, Jeff, played for the Tigers in the 90s. So there's a legacy there. He's currently committed to James Madison. Got the offer this weekend. Tigers looking at a 2-quarterback class, and he took his official visit. So we're just kind of keeping out for that one. Just wanted the people to know. Before we get over to basketball, quick read from our sponsors over at Rowback. There's only one way to describe Rowback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rowback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rowback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. Kyle and I are both wearing it right now. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Roback's everyday shorts or their Delta performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code MIZ20 on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MIZ20. Kyle, getting into the basketball world now. I know it's a very busy time of the year with women's basketball, men's basketball, and football all overlapping. I know you're kind of looking forward to getting on the road soon, and you can really just focus on some of these final football games too with Oklahoma and Arkansas up next on the schedule. But we're going to have to talk about the basketball team. 2 wins over the weekend. Really a busy weekend too for Mizzou Athletics with men's basketball playing Southeast Missouri State, winning that game 89-84 on Friday at home. In the home opener, had some recruits in attendance this past weekend as well, with Jason Crow Jr. and Aiden Chronister, both commits in the 2026 class being at that game. And then on Sunday, you had VMI coming to town. You got some cool video too of class of 2027 commit Scotty Atkinson taking some shots after the game while you were working on your stories after that win, 106-68. And there's, of course, a lot of overlap with that VMI staff and Missouri. Quick takeaways from those games before we get into the first Power 4 matchup of the season for the Tigers.
Yeah, the SEMO game was obviously pretty ugly. Just not a lot really went right for Mizzou, especially in that first half. There were a lot of reactions that seemed pretty over the top in my head. Sometimes you play bad for 10 or 15 minutes. It just kind of happens, especially Dennis Gates' teams at Mizzou have traditionally had at least one non-con game against a lower tier opponent that has looked bad. If that's all that SEMO is, then great. And they bounced back against VMI and looked great. So, it's not, there was nothing coming out of SEMO that I was specifically worried about. VMI, their coach, Andrew Wilson, who was a player at Florida State while Gates was on the, GA there, pointed out afterward repeatedly that the size and length that Mizzou has on its roster is not something that they see ever in the Southern Conference. It's an impressive amount of size and length for a power conference team, even going against, once you get into power conference opponents like tonight against Minnesota, it'll still be bigger and longer than a lot of teams are used to seeing. If you throw that up against a Southern Conference team, I mean, you saw what happened. They won 60-2 points in the paint. That's wild. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think with that too, that was without Sean Phillips too. I think that's something that could be noted is that he had a great first game. He was the player of the game probably against Howard, leading in rebounds and points for the Tigers, 16 and 11 points and rebounds respectively. And then you go into SEMO, and I don't think he probably had the best performance. He really didn't, like, it's from everything I heard. I was out at a high school football game and didn't get to see that one. And then you go against VMI and he's out with an illness, didn't play in that one, and you're still dominating the paint. I think that truly shows a lot of the athleticism and length that you're talking about. And then going into this game now, just with you're facing your first Power 4 opponent of the season in Minnesota, finishing that home and home that they started 2 years ago. They went up and had a very emphatic win in that Minnesota contest. Caleb Grill got ejected in that one. He's going to be back for this one. What are some of the keys to the game for the 7 p.m. contest tonight when we're recording this on Wednesday?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it there, but Phillips is good to go. Gates made kind of a last-minute decision Sunday not to play him after, for third game in like 5 days. We are continuing the early season injury saga of Honor Boateng, Trent Pierce, and Trent Burns. So none of them will be available tonight. I think the key, again, as it has been through these first few games, is going to be dominating the paint on both sides. I mean, we've talked a lot about the length and the size. I already talked about that. I asked Gates specifically in our press conference yesterday how he sees this year's offensive philosophy as different from previous seasons, because after the Howard game in his press conference, he said he was happy his team did not fall in love with the three, which is something that he talked about all through last year, all through 2 years ago, was he wanted more and more and more three-pointers. So to come out and say, I'm happy my team didn't take a whole lot of threes. I think they had 15 against Howard. They had like 19 against SEMO, and then like 22, I think, against VMI. That's significantly down from where the Tigers were operating at their best last season. So it's been a definite shift, and his answer didn't quite get to it wasn't quite the type of answer I expected, but it was the way he answered it was by hitting on how unique of a player Mark Mitchell is, and how he has always had 2 to 3 defenders kind of keying on him. So the way that they can operate this year with extra size on the court is by pulling out those bigger defenders, try to force them away from the paint, space the floor better, space the defense better, so that Mitchell can have more room to drive. Same with Ant Robinson and Sebastian Mack. So getting those driving lanes, getting cutting lanes, cruising in the paint, and on the defensive side, containing Minnesota's interior, because this will be the first time the Tigers play a team that has the size to kind of match up with them. Not quite to the same level, but Minnesota has a couple of guys who are 6'7", 6'9", 6'10", who are key players. So that could force a different look for Mizzou tonight.
19, 15, and 21. That's the three-pointers in a row. And in this game, too, against VMI, just looking back at that one, 42 three-point attempts for the Cadets, 15 made. That kind of really stood out to me. I didn't really expect that. But when you talk about that length, there's probably not many opportunities to score on the inside. Any other just kind of updates on what the roster looks like right now? I know there's still some question marks around Pierce, Boateng, and Burns. And Burns was one that you probably expect maybe a couple weeks to try to get back into the mix, and of course missed all of his freshman season. He's a redshirt freshman now. Is there really any update there other than they're just evaluating the situations with those three?
Not really. Just continuing to evaluate. Burns is expected. He had a medical procedure back in August or September. And his timeline ended up being that he would hit his return to play protocol, and the earliest possible return would have been game 2. That wasn't expected, really. The extended possibility of that return to play protocol would have put him on track to play the border war. So it's kind of anywhere in this range of the next couple of weeks is possible for his return and hopefully debut. Because as you mentioned, didn't see him at all last year. Pierce has been practicing consistently. He didn't practice Monday, I think Gates said. But like last week, he was practicing through the week and is just continually kind of a late decision to not include him. And Gates has mentioned with Boateng a couple of times that they're still evaluating what the issue is, which I find interesting. But once again, everyone's being kind of secretive about what the actual issues are. We've seen that from Gates's staff in terms of injuries in previous seasons too. I know it's frustrating. It's hard to get interior updates as well. So we're just going to have to kind of wait and see on those.
One of my favorite things about college coaches, this even extends, to the pros. I saw it firsthand with Dusty Baker when he was on the Astros. They don't have to say it. They probably don't want to. If they just will try to keep it in as much as they can. Do you want to guess the line for this game from BetMGM?
Mizzou -8.
Very close. Mizzou -7.5. Over under set at 157.5 for this contest with the Golden Gophers. This game at 7 p.m. here on Wednesday. So might not have all the time in the world to listen to our little preview and talk about it, just talking about men's basketball, but will be on SEC Network Plus. Kyle, quick score prediction from you.
Oh, okay. I'll say Mizzou wins 83-77.
Okay. So Mizzou
I think that would not cover because
would not cover 6 points.
That's 6 points, but then the over. Didn't you say 150?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, just in the right ballpark. I think you are.
I think both of these teams going up against the best competition they've faced this year, it's not going to look the same for either of them. Minnesota's kind of rolled through its first 2 games against lower level opponents. And, it's going to be more of a struggle to do that against a big Mizzou team versus, I can't remember who I saw that Minnesota has played so far. I know they played North Dakota in one of their exhibitions because I thought that was a real game on their schedule.
Two home games this year. Gardner-Webb and Alcorn State won both of those games, 87-60 and 95-50 respectively. That's the start of the year for the Golden Gophers. Only 2 teams have lost games in the Big Ten so far: Maryland and Washington. Everyone else is either 2-0 and 2-0 or better. Kyle, signing day started today for a couple of sports, including men's and women's basketball. We'll just hit on some men's basketball notes right now. Jason Crow Jr., of course, the top commit in this class. Things open today. You've already seen it. If by the time we're recording this, Tony Bryant is already officially signed. I spoke with Aiden Chronister's dad, and he was expected to sign either digitally last night or this morning, but he's not going to wait. He's going to wait until Friday to do his signing ceremony. In a similar case with Jason Crow, who's going to wait till 1:30 p.m. Central Time on Thursday at his high school to do his signing day. So that's just where things kind of stand. Not really expecting any issues with any 3 of these guys, especially with Tony already confirmed by the university to have signed his letter of intent. Right now, Missouri is the number 2 recruiting class in the Rivals industry ranking, trailing only Arkansas. Really close, at the top there. Missouri was in the number 1 spot at one point. Chronister was a top 150 recruit at one point, but he also fell out recently and lost his 4th star in the process. Kansas is standing in 3rd right now, and those aren't going to be set in stone. There's schools like Duke and some other ones, Oklahoma State, that might move up there from might be still in the mix for certain recruits, or certain recruits receive better ratings down the line. So Mizzou at number 2 right now. Of course, that could change, but we got scouting reports. We got quotes from Dennis Gates already talking about Tony Bryant. We've had success with players that share his skill sets, like Kobe Brown and Mark Mitchell, and we think he can be the next forward to flourish within our system. So go to Mizzou Today, and you can read all about the 3 of those guys, even quotes from the 3 players, either themselves or their parents and coaches. So we got you covered on that. Kyle, any final last thoughts before we get out of here?
I'll add on. Women's basketball signing period also started. I've been updating a thread consistently when those signings become official. The expectation is Kelly Harper's team's going to add 3 4-stars in the next, assumedly today, next couple of days. They already added 2 players. One was Jada Maples, who's a 4-star, and the other's name is Ceciline Brandymore, who was the first recruit to commit to Harper. So Coach Harper and the women's basketball staff have been pretty straightforward about wanting to build through high school recruiting as much as possible going forward. They were obviously unable to do that for year 1, so they went to the portal. And I've got to say, after watching last night's game, I'm growing more impressed with the portal class that they brought in. It definitely took a couple of games for them to kind of get stuff figured out a little bit, but I think they have a couple of really strong guards and probably the best post player they've had in at least 3 or 4 years now. Do I expect that to hold up once they get into SEC play and are playing like South Carolina and Tennessee? Probably not. But for now, I think this is a better trajectory for Mizzou women's basketball, and adding a recruiting class that includes 3 4-stars for next year and a couple of post players to kind of add bodies into that position where the Tigers have really struggled the last handful of years. could make a big difference going forward.
That's going to do it for this episode of Mizzou Today, the Mizzou Today Show on 3 and Rivals. You can follow Kyle on X at Kyle_McAreavy. Get all of his updates, of course, at Mizzou Today with the games coming up. Mizzou basketball tonight, of course, at 7, and then a 6:40 kick for Mississippi State on Saturday. Both not on the best networks, SEC Network Plus tonight and SEC Network, but that's just kind of like the state of the seasons right now for both sports, and that's what you're going to expect. But big week next week is Oklahoma, and we'll preview that on Wednesday, even talk a little bit more about Mizzou basketball. And Kyle, you have one last thing.
I do. I just want to say before we get out of here, for those of you coming across the podcast or the video on YouTube who aren't subscribed, it's $1 for your first week. So, we've talked about all the stuff that we've covered. We talked about the very busy last 6 or 7 days that I've had. Kenny's got all this great recruiting coverage. Come join the community. It's just $1. Come see for your first week. Check it out. See if you think it's worth it to hang around and join us.
Of course, there's a yearly subscription deal that comes with a complimentary athletic subscription as well. So if you're looking for more coverage there, more national coverage of other sports that you like and that you follow, that's a nice add-on as well. Kyle, that's going to do it for this episode on the Mizzou Today Show. We will see you guys next week previewing Oklahoma and talk even more about college basketball in Mizzou. We will see you then. One last thing. Here's my rock.